This week, Pakistan-born leg spinner Fawad Ahmed was granted Australian citizenship, paving the way for the former refugee to play Test cricket. In a way, there was a hint of history repeating itself. Almost 50 years ago, another leg spinner born on the subcontinent required prime ministerial intervention to wear the baggy green cap. Mike Sexton spoke to Rex Sellers about his extraordinary life and career.
South Australian cricket in the early 1960s was spiced with the flavour of the Caribbean. The great West Indian all-rounder Gary Sobers played for 3 seasons here, and his genius with the bat and ball drew crowds to the Adelaide Oval. From the hats in the members' stand to the white and blue collars in the outer. Sobers was a natural fit for a side led by Les Favell, who encouraged entertaining, adventurous cricket. And in 1963-64, the side won the Sheffield Shield behind the 2 highest wicket takers in the competition, Sobers and Rex Sellers.
I'd contributed, I dare say, as well as I could, and Sobers was the other one who got 50-odd wickets, so between the two of us we got 100 wickets, and maybe that helped me get across.
At the end of that summer, Richie Benaud retired and the Australian selectors were looking for a leg spinner to take to England for the Ashes defence. They selected Sellers, and in doing so capped a remarkable journey that had begun on the subcontinent 24 years earlier.
It was a wonderful thrill, and I was certainly looking forward to that tour and hoping to be able to maximise my talent as best I could.
Rex Sellers was born in India during the war, and during the post-war upheaval of the subcontinent, his parents decided to migrate. With Anglo-Indian heritage, they could sidestep the White Australia policy, and so in 1947, Rex, his older brother Basil and their mother joined the wave of post-war migrants. On board the ship, they met an Englishman on his way to Adelaide to take up a position as headmaster of King's College, now known as Pembroke.
That's how I went to King's College, and my brother and I. We were boarders when we first went there for the first 2 years. Then my father was still back in India, but just in case we weren't happy in Australia, bought a home on Taylor's Road, we now know as South Road. And of course that's the story from there, of course, is pretty simple.
Rex Sellers soon found he shared a love of sport with young Australians. The summer game was familiar, but there was a new sport played down South Road at Thebarton Oval.
I must admit I did enjoy that. I wasn't a bad sort of a kick either, as it turned out. But I really loved the game when my mother bought that home and went down to watch West Orange playing, and I became a supporter ever since and have loved every minute of it.
He was still a teenager when first selected for South Australia in 1959, and his breakthrough year in 63-4 saw him handed a baggy green and a ticket to England. Although there was some paperwork still to get in order, the British press splashed that Sellers was not an Australian citizen and was still using a British passport.
Sir Robert Menzies read that, and very quickly a administrator back here in Adelaide, a bureaucrat, contacted my parents and said we should do something about that, and I was very fast-tracked and became an Australian citizen, which I'm very proud of.
The side formed up in Perth. Sellers was alongside state teammates Barry Jarman and Neil Hawke, with whom he shared a room for the entire 7-month tour. Bob Simpson captained the side that was given a briefing by Sir Donald Bradman and the selectors and left in no doubt as to what was expected.
It's a mission. Quite often it's referred to as the Battle of the Ashes, and that's exactly what it is. It's war when we go across there, and every one of us are prepared to try and maximise our talents to make sure that we do achieve the end result. Let's make sure we retain the Ashes.
The mission was a success, but for Rex Sellers it was both fascinating and frustrating. He was a guest at number 10 Downing Street and met the Queen, but was sidelined when a cyst grew on the tendon of his spinning finger that required surgery. After the Ashes were retained, the tour continued with a test series in India and Pakistan, during which Rex Sellers was finally selected.
Unfortunately, I think 2.5 days of the test match were washed out because we were coming from at the end of their monsoon, so a lot of their wickets were a lot softer and not really akin, I think, to a spinner at that stage.
He managed just 5 overs and it was his last match. The finger never healed properly and it forced his retirement from the game.
Neil Barnes.
In the decades that followed, Rex Sellers became a successful businessman. He was also president of his beloved West Torrens Footy Club in their hour of crisis, steering them into a successful amalgamation with Woodville in 1990.
That was probably the most difficult time of my life. Bill Sanders then contacted me and said, we're going to find it very difficult if Port do go into the AFL. So would you consider having a chat? And that's what we did. And hence you can now see what's happened.
Both he and his brother are generous with their time and money. Among other things, Basil Sellers is responsible for a series of statues at the Adelaide Oval and the Sydney Cricket Ground. This year, Rex Sellers received an Order of Australia for his community service.
I believe that we probably had some of this entrepreneurial instinct more from my mother. She's the one who came out here with just the 2 boys, 12 and 7.5. We think we've got a lot of that from her because she'd never worked in her life and then walked along Norwood Parade and got herself a job sewing buttons on at a dry cleaner's.
Now, almost 50 years after his Ashes tour, Rex Sellers will be keenly watching the Test matches this winter. The old spinner believes Australia is more of a chance than some critics suggest. And even though his own experience of the highest level was fleeting, he remains grateful to the sport and the country.
I think we're so grateful to have been able to maximise what we've been able to do in life and to be able to have the opportunity to be able to put something back without actually thinking that way. It was just natural to do.
7:30's resident cricket tragic Mike Sexton with that report.